All right, finally, the last episode of season 1 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This is one of those where, if you look at this from a TTRPG standpoint, it's a setup. Yeah, because this episode has 3 separate things put into it that are important story things. Okay, yes, it has an A plot and a B plot, but the B plot, the whole point of the B plot is figuring out what the B plot is. And the B plot's not what they think it is. And that's what makes the story so memorable overall. Of course, the fact that the A plot gets worked into that was shoehorned and kind of sort of felt dumb. But it did kind of, like, what would Picard have done if he hadn't found someone from the 20th century at random? I have no idea. Interesting question. But the basic gist of it is something has happened near the Federation Romulan neutral zone that has caused certain Federation colonies to, well, no one's really sure what happened to them. Just that they can't talk to any of the people at those colonies anymore. So they send the Federation flagship to investigate, because they suspect that the, closest hostile known race is the Romulans, so they suspect that it might be the Romulans doing something. Yeah. Well, I already told you that it's not what they think it is, so let's get on to that. As anyone who's seen this before, and, it's been over 40 years since they aired this one, so, yeah, it was the Borg. This was part of their lead-up introduction to introducing the Borg as the big bad of Star Trek The Next Generation. See, originally, they were going to have one of the previous episodes with the parasitic insects be the lead up to the next big bad. It's just that they decided to change their plans. And note how in this episode we don't see any sign that the bad guys are cybernetic aliens who fly cube-shaped spaceships. No. All we see is that they are doing this thing that causes colonies to be removed. Just straight up gone. Nothing left behind. And that, while it is semi-consistent with what we know of Borg stuff, because, like, when the Borg are encountering a new civilization, they acquire pieces of its technology in order to study them and analyze them and learn how to assimilate this new technology. Well, that being said, this ends up becoming an investigation because Picard doesn't know why anything is happening. And you could actually do a setup like this with your own story and actually have the bug aliens be the real culprit this time. Because the fact that the actual story that was shown here does not actually have the big bad show up. You see the footsteps of the big bad. You ponder the footsteps, and then you're like, oh, he went that way. But you don't actually get around to following the big bad. And that is part of what makes this episode so memorable. They spend the entire episode trying to figure out what the threat is, who the threat is. And they don't actually get far enough to actually see the threat. They just figure out that the Romulans aren't the threat. I mean, the Romulans are kind of an annoyance and so on and so forth, but they're not this annoyance. Anyway, though, That's another thing about this that's interesting is that the culmination of this relies on a series of charisma persuasion checks. You see, oh, also, there's a moment where Picard fails his int check. Or actually, you know what? We could say that one of the Romulans won in a charisma persuasion check, where Picard got intimidated by the Romulan instead of getting the Romulan to do what he wanted. These two are actually a rather interesting characters that we have for the Romulans in this episode. Even though this is literally the only time those two characters show up, and they only show up for a few minutes at the end of the episode, they were actually good. See, okay, beginning of the episode, obviously, they have been dispatched to do the thing. Well, along the way, they find a piece of space junk from Earth with people frozen inside it. Why? Yeah, this is one of those things where the writers decided they wanted to have people from old Earth before the Federation existed show up just because, and the logic behind it is pretty convoluted. Short version, these people were all dying of some reason or other, but had enough money to be able to afford to have themselves cryogenically frozen, shoved into this satellite thingy, and the satellite launched uh, into space, where they would stay frozen until someone found it. If this sounds like a good idea to anyone, how did you get to have that much money to be able to afford to do this? Seriously. If you think this is a good idea, how did you manage to collect enough money for this? That aside, it's kind of sort of like a side quest thing because um the way it's presented in the story, Picard has the option to simply log it, send a message to Starfleet Command requesting that another ship come to pick it up, and then leave it. Picard didn't have to remove the people from it, uncryogenically freeze them, and then start talking to them while on the way to do diplomatic negotiations with Romulans to try to get information about something that's been going on that the Romulans don't actually want to talk to him about. Kind of, sort of. That's where I get in the whole like charisma persuasion check thing, because the fact that that conversation was interesting. So for half the episode, we spend it with the crew of the Enterprise learning about the people from the past. And they're 400 years out of date. They literally got frozen and woke up in the future, like 400 years in the future. And one of the things that's interesting here is that they spend a lot of time with the whole like getting to understand the current present day and blah 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 blah. Yeah, this guy here actually understands human nature very, very well. And that was how he got to his money, actually, is that he was someone who was a people person. And when he talked to people, he could figure out what they wanted relatively quickly and easily. And that was the core of the business that he had been doing, is understanding people and their motives and so on and so forth. Well, when he meets Tibok, he's able to guess what Tibok wants. Now, if Tibok looks familiar, Mark Alamo, better known for playing Cardassians. But in this case, he plays a Romulan and does quite a good job of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Golmaset. And Ducat. Oh, hey, here's his role as T-Bach. Anyway, though, enough of that. T-Bach is a Romulan commander and is actually investigating the destruction of several Romulan colonies near the neutral zone because whatever has been attacking outposts and colonies in the neutral zone has been attacking both sides. It's actually kind of sort of a retcon in a later episode that it was the Borg doing this because of the fact that in this episode we do not see any information at all about what was actually the problem. And the key crucial thing that happens at the end of the episode is for, what's his name again? Oppenhaus? Rittenhouse? Offenhouse. Offenhouse, while listening to T-Bach and Picard go at it with each other over the incident without actually coming out and saying what they actually want to each other, Offenhouse deduces that T-Bach is here because he's trying to get information out of Picard. T-Bach wants Picard to talk. And the fact that Picard is asking questions instead of giving answers is kind of off-putting to T-Bach, and he's not really sure what to do about it. So he's having this linguistic stalemate because he's trying to figure out how to get Picard to give him answers that Picard doesn't actually have. While at the same time, Picard is asking him questions that he can't answer because they're asking questions about the same thing. Each of them wants the other to answer a question that both of them are here to find an answer to. And when Picard realizes that, yeah, that conversation got interesting fast. But that's what I was saying the whole thing about Picard failing his check is that Picard wasn't able to get T-Bach to actually tell him what he wanted to know because, he was approaching it from the wrong angle. He was demanding that the Romulans fess up to their nefarious plans, and that wasn't really what was going on at all. Romulans weren't up to anything nefarious in this episode. Surprise! Anyways, though. And that was actually the big part of this episode, is the whole thing with... Oh, yeah, also, historical stuff. This is actually an episode that has some interesting historical things that get thrown into it. The Tomed incident was a confrontation between Romulan Federation planets and Romulan Star Empire. The incident led to the signing of the Treaty of Algernon, which banned Federation research into or use of any cloaking device and led to the withdrawal of the Romulan government from interstellar affairs until 2364. The Romulan government avoiding interstellar affairs does not appear to be something that was part of the treaty. It was just that they didn't feel like talking to the Federation. That was it. They just didn't want to have diplomatic contact with the Federation and had been avoiding doing anything and everything that would result in having Romulan citizens interacting with Federation citizens. Why? That's an interesting question because, yeah, see that single sentence there describing it as a confrontation? That's literally the only thing we know about it. Hey, that's something you can have fun with. What was the Tomed incident? And how would your players handle it? Yeah, that's just a story you could tell. It is background lore behind the neutral zone and several other episodes, but it is not something that was ever actually explained in universe. Although it does mention here that thousands of people ended up dying as a result of it. We don't know how or even who. Interesting, huh? Well then, and let's see here. Anything else? Oh yeah, also the space capsule thingy. Uh, this is one of those things where it's relics from old Earth's pre-warp attempts at space travel, and like something that we see in certain other episodes, it isn't actually capable of being flown through interstellar space. It gets launched and then just kind of drifts. And that was something that would have resulted in all of the people on board it dying if not for the fact that Picard found it and successfully retrieved them. Which, the number of times that that plot device got used is rather impressive, actually. However, used it did. So that's about wraps it up for this one. Because the majority of this episode is kind of sort of just people talking about things. And they actually consumed almost half the episode just explaining who the past people are. Yeah, that's like um just the basic gist of the episode as a whole is. Oh, also there is actually one thing that's cool in here is that in this episode it is the first time in the Next Generation where anyone saw a Pterodactyl. Oh yes, new starship design surprise reveals. Ta-da! The Pterodactyls are one of my favorite Next Generation era designs. Very cool looking ships. At any rate, though, that is actually something that you could have fun with in a TTRPG too. Is hey, here's a new enemy. Here is the things that you will be fighting for the next 3 or 4 sessions, and then give them a nice detailed description of how all of this stuff is and stuff. Now, the other thing about this one that was kind of interesting and to feel like I should throw in here before I leave off is that Picard and his crew, seemingly out of boredom, have the main bridge crew interacting with the formerly frozen people because of the fact that they don't really have anything better to do at the moment, even though they're flying to the neutral zone because they're about to have diplomatic negotiations with the Romulans. They don't really have anything better to do while they're en route. Now, if you were a player in a story like this, obviously the players would be the ones who end up with these NPCs. So you would have the player party taking the role of the bridge crew, even though the player party might not actually be bridge crew under normal circumstances. You would have them doing that role of meeting the new people and figuring out what their whole deal is. Because that was half the episode. And, you can't just, leave that out if you're going to do something based on this as a TTRPG module. Alrighty then. I guess I'll leave it off here. See you guys next.